So I'm Ameeta Soni, and I am president of Altec Consulting, and I serve as an interim CMO for tech and digital health companies. Just a little bit about me as well, a little bit more in detail. I wear a couple of different hats. In addition to my consulting experiences, I also serve on the investment committee of a seed VC fund and have been working with startups, again, in a lot of different roles as a founder, CXO, consultant, investor, board role, and just have a lot of fun with all of it. So moving on first to just thinking about the business models first before we talk about the revenue models. The business model itself just encompasses a lot, whether it's the product, the target market or markets, the value proposition, and the competitive differentiators, not only from the direct competition, but the indirect competition as well, because a lot of times, whether it's ways people have been doing things or might be in the future, but not necessarily just direct competition. The go-to-market strategy and the revenue models. But what's really key in all of this is as companies are looking to be profitable, it's the levers really are the pricing and the costs. And the revenue models are all about how does the company make money? What is the value proposition and what's the price and how the customers will pay and how does it fit in terms of their buying processes? And you know, I'm thinking B2B as well as B2C, and some of those things depend in terms of the price point as well, you know, how large a purchase it is for people. And it's also this revenue model, which especially helps companies, especially when they're younger companies and are, you know, when you're looking to be profitable, but also just sustain, you know, as startups are getting going, that it helps people get a sense of how much they'll be able to plan for or project in terms of revenues overall using that model and how they can plan for their expenses as well. So I want to talk today about some revenue models, which are subscription, licensing, advertising, transactional, markup, affiliate, and something which is very, very important, especially going forward, is the data sale aspect of things. And I say that because, interestingly, as we are getting more and more into using the AI applications, a lot of times they're looking for different data sets to work with. So if people have been thinking about even whether it's the primary offering or adjacent offering, the data itself, that becomes a big piece. We've all seen software as a service grow a lot over the last few years in popularity, but increasingly it's everything as a service. And I'll get through some examples on that in a bit. But what people are finding very attractive now is it's just that it's the lower upfront costs, but it's also that overall experience where they don't have to look at it in terms of having to deal with the maintenance or the support issue. So it's a much less support burden as such. There's better flexibility and scalability, but just overall, the experience is much better. There's a lot less involved for people. And from vendors' point of view, it's the recurring revenues which become very attractive in a B2B setting. You're working with the OpEx versus the CapEx, which means that fewer people are involved and the sales cycle ends up being a lot shorter. And ultimately, because you also have, again, that enhanced customer experience and the shorter sales cycle, we're just seeing much higher lifetime value for the customer. I'm sorry, it just takes a minute to scroll down for some reason. My screen is frozen, so Laura, can you just help with that?
I was going to say, you want to try to stop sharing and then share again?
Let me try that. Sorry about that, everyone.
Is that helping?
No, it's not. Sorry about that. I don't know if it's a bandwidth issue. I guess if everyone else can just turn off video, maybe that would help. I'm not quite sure.
I think everybody should be off video. I don't know if you want to get out of presentation mode and see if that helps.
Okay, let me try. Sorry about that.
We have all been there, I'm sure.
No.
All right, we can see you again.
Yeah, let me just see if this way I can just scroll down from the other side. Okay, so I was talking about how we are seeing increasingly much more from as being delivered as a service. So certainly on the software side, we have seen companies, whether it's like Salesforce or HubSpot or Slack, but the important piece is going forward, SaaS is going to be driven by the data. It's the integration of the business intelligence and the smart data for the service-based solutions. For consumer products, this is interesting. With cars, it's not only just transportation as a service that we've seen with Uber and Lyft, but you also have cars themselves. Like Volvo, for example, has a Care by Volvo offering where a single payment is the car payment, the insurance payment, maintenance, wear and tear, everything. There's no down payment and there's no long-term commitment either. Again, they're just trying to make everything as easy as possible for the customer. So it's all in one transaction and reducing the hassle factor. On the hardware side, you have devices like Lenovo, where you can choose the device or the service level. The hardware, you have the accompanying software, support, analytics, reporting. And again, from a customer point of view, you're just using it and it doesn't matter, how the hardware is being handled. You don't have to deal with any of the maintenance or upgrades or anything. HP is doing that with printers. They're doing it more for the commercial printers, but there are other companies doing it with individuals for home, where it's printing as a service. And another interesting example I thought was flash parking. What they do is we've all seen the parking kiosks in the airports and the parking garages. They handle it as essentially hardware as a service, where they take care of having those the hardware, the kiosks themselves, but take care of the transactional stuff, the reporting, the software upgrades, whatever. Everything is all included in there. Here are two other examples. Butterfly is providing energy efficiency as a service, and Cambrian is handling wastewater treatment as a service. So there's no customer out-of-pocket cost, and in both cases, that can be fairly significant cost that we are talking about in terms of the, in case of Butterfly, the energy efficiency related upgrades, or in case of Cambrian, the major equipment required for the wastewater treatment. So they handle the monitoring, the maintenance, and the upgrades, the other kinds of upgrades for just the equipment or the software, connected software. And for them, they essentially, for example, if the savings they're able to do is the 50%, and they're guaranteeing, in case of Butterfly, 10% of what a customer pays to the utilities, then the difference is theirs. And there's a growing residual revenue stream as such. With licensing, we have seen that while certainly software licensing is falling out of favor as SaaS revenues grow, but it still is very important in other cases. We've all had the experience where ketchup just sticks to the bottle when you have, trying to get it out. Liquid Glide has licensed technology from MIT, which has essentially a permanently wet surface technology, which eliminates this issue as such. Open source initiative approved licenses allow the software, the open source software, to be used and shared as well. On the consumer side, you have the Patriot logos for the t-shirt manufacturers, and the master licensor, as far as toys go, Hasbro, often licenses rights to manufacture toys based on movies. In this case, this was from the world of Trolls. Advertising, certainly from a print perspective, the days of print newspapers was related to the ad space, but with the digital aspect, continues with the digital version of the newspapers, but also the search engines and the social media platforms. And also what's interesting in all of those is it's easy to further monetize it based on the analytics one gets from that. The transactional aspect or the marketplaces, these are the one-time sales, and they are on the B2C side as well as the B2B. On the B2C side, we're seeing the the individuals buying the arts and crafts kind of thing from Etsy. But on the B2B side, you have everything ranging from solar panels and energy sage to working with freelancers on Fiverr or 3D models on CG Trader and aircraft parts on SatAir. In all of these cases, the marketplace is owned by the administrator, and there are two kinds of fees. There's a fee for listing for the seller, and then per successful transaction as well. Traditionally, we've had the brick and mortar retailers or stores where you would have markups. They would buy products from manufacturers and mark it up and sell it in the store. In the e-version or in e-commerce as well, you have similar stuff going on with the Amazon and the Walmart as well. And in case of Amazon, for example, there are fees associated with markups, and then they have something called FBA, where they have stuff related to the fulfillment by Amazon aspect of it as well. And then we have the affiliates. With the affiliates, we have the, again, on an e-commerce perspective, you have the large online merchants, whether it is eBay or Amazon itself, or large companies like Home Depot, which also have a substantial e-commerce presence as such. Here, the online merchants are paying the affiliates for the ads or links to the merchant site. These are ads which are placed on their site for the affiliates website for ads and links to the merchant site. And again, it's the advertisers pay commissions only for the conversions, the successful conversions. And this dovetails very nicely with the ad model as well. I talked about the importance of monetizing data. What's very interesting in this is there are two ways that people are handling this data. One is where you have, it's in case of Foursquare, for example, this was they have their own app. They're able to get this location data for individuals and then sell it to retailers. For retailers, they see the advantage. They can optimize the hours, the staffing, and the inventory. They can target their advertising or measure the impact based on some real hard data as such. In case of Urginet, they look at it as, they saw an opportunity there for a lot of the banks. They're looking to increase their customer base. And oftentimes, some of the customers just don't have that credit history, which they need to validate their credit worthiness. But virtually everyone has a utility bill. So what Urginet did was they set up ways to get access to those utility bills and then provide them, in a form which would work well for these banks to essentially allow for expanded financial access. And I mentioned earlier the piece about how for all these AI type of applications, the data sets, initially they need a lot of data sets to train the digital agents. So that becomes very important. And, and then of course you have companies where your core business may be something else, but if you can capture the data alongside, whether you use it or sell it or somebody else finds it useful later on, it's just a good idea to capture it upfront. For example, one of the companies where I used to work, where I was CMO, had an offering essentially for real estate portfolio management. We focused on the software and the services, but our clients were extremely large organizations with billions of square feet under management. And we started capturing the data initially. At the time when we started, we were a younger company, not quite sure what we were going to do with it. But essentially, after about 4 or 5 years, we just had so much of this data, we were able to spin out a consulting practice within the company itself, which essentially the consulting practice, the core offering was around the benchmarking. This data was available to us on an anonymized basis. But when we were sharing with other clients as such, but we could essentially say, give people a sense of what size portfolios they had and what the best practices were. And this certainly became a pretty good revenue stream for us as well. And of course, other companies may decide they're not doing it themselves, but it could be something that somebody else may be willing to procure that data from them. So which revenue model is right for you? It really has to fit with the offering itself. How does the product compare with the competition? How are there any industry benchmarks, and how does it fit with that? Where are the customers, and how accessible are they to you? What's it going to take what's the best way to reach them? How are they currently buying other products as well? If they're used to buying all the other products in a particular way, then it's going to be a harder switch to get them to start adopting your model, unless there's a very big financial incentive to do it, And even then people think twice, because a financial incentive, if it means changing their way of doing things altogether, it's a big ask. So and then the buying process itself and the price points. When you have products which are much cheaper in terms of dollars and cents versus large purchases, which it just changed their people's behavior in terms of what is involved. And then also what's the target market's pain point as well, so that kind of fills in with that. The competitors, how are the competitors selling right now, and what seems to be working or not? I mean, are you the first person with this revenue model? And that's great at some times, and other times you just have to kind of get a read for the market itself. And then the other thing is, it's not that one is committed to a revenue model for life. It's like, especially for younger companies when they're starting off, you kind of test the waters. You get a sense of how people are reacting to this, what's the feedback, and it's constantly getting that data, analyzing it, experimenting, refining, and optimizing, and in certain cases, deciding to switch to something else. Or, one doesn't have to limit oneself just to having only one model as such, one revenue model. Sometimes it makes sense to have a couple, even for younger companies, if they are kind of tied in. For others, as companies grow and larger companies, and you saw even in the examples that I was talking about, that there were really a mix of companies offering more than one type of model. And also the other thing which could do is, as your offerings change, in terms of additional products or services, as the offering mix changes the model itself, the revenue models change accordingly as well. So that's kind of what I had to say, but happy to take questions.
All right, thank you. In a time check, we have about 14 minutes. There are a couple questions. First question was, how do you evaluate or assess the revenue model and what metrics should we look at?
But, some of it will come absolutely from the feedback from the market itself. Initially, for example, if it's a new thing, if it's a new revenue model as you're going to market, you get some feedback immediately from customers, and then it also boils down to the metrics as you start seeing from the market, like are you seeing a spike? I mean, what seems to be working or not? So you get the best thing is really the feedback from the market.
All right, and the kind of second question, how long should you stay with the revenue model to get enough data? Like for 2 months or 12 months?
So I think 12 months is a lot, but it also depends on the company itself and the product as such. But 12 months feels like too much for the especially for the younger companies where you need to be a little bit more nimble. But it depends on the product as well.
That was the last question that I saw in the chat. If anybody has any more, you can post. We have about 12 more minutes. I had a question. Did you have any suggestions for resources on this topic?
Yeah, and I can also put something, perhaps what I can do is when I'm going to be, I think all speakers are asked to provide a copy of the presentation, and I can add a slide at the back with some resources which people might find helpful.
Awesome. I think the question I see pop up is very similar to that one. Just asking if there's a resource or directory of every revenue model, business model. So is that something that you could also provide, or would that be in the list of resources?
I can add that to the list of resources. I think one just has to be careful about that, though, because some of the revenue models which have been in place, say, 5 or 10 years ago, may not be quite appropriate right now because the external market has changed and the way people are handling things or their expectations have changed. So one just has to be very careful about with some of the older resources. I'm not saying everything which is old is not right, but some things are just not that appropriate anymore.
Okay. And I saw another question come in. Can you give some examples of business models you've seen used in digital health companies?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. And, with digital health, it's, first of all, digital health itself covers a lot of ground. There's a lot of different things covered under digital, whether it is AI-based solutions or apps or, just platforms where you are essentially connecting patients and providers or scheduling patient appointments. So it's a broad mix as such, but and marketplaces as well. So the one thing one has to absolutely keep in mind with digital health is healthcare itself is complicated because you have the users, the patients themselves, and then users also from a clinician perspective. But then the payers are altogether different, whether it is the private payers, the insurance companies, or the CMS, the Medicare, Medicaid as such. And with digital health, it's been a mix. If it's like apps as such, a lot of times companies will start off with the direct-to-consumer model as such, but because people are so attuned to having insurance companies pay that you'll end up going looking for some of the insurance payment related to that. You do have marketplaces, again, and even with marketplaces, it boils down to what's the price point. Is it something that people are comfortable paying on their own, or is it something which requires more of an insurance play?